supporters, community leaders, and the community. So I'm thrilled that you're here this evening. This venue is made possible in part through the support from Drake Law School, and I wish to thank Jerry Anderson, the Dean of the Law School. If you haven't already seen the display, drawn from the Iowa NBA archives in the central lobby area adjacent to the auditorium, then please stop by after this lecture. This display was organized by Jessica Neal from the Law Library, and after tonight it'll move to the Law Library and be on view through mid-August. So it's really pretty extraordinary, and I really encourage you to stop by.
You need to turn the sound up.
Yeah. Okay. The dream of realizing a monumental journey is a tremendous source of community pride. It is a far-reaching example of our public art process that depends upon a creative, collaborative approach to planning.
Pay no attention.
Pay no attention. Our aim is to enrich the lives in our community by advancing the best of public art. Tonight, you'll be hearing from an individual who's one of the most celebrated artists working in the United States. His art has drawn viewers to consider the American experience through the Black experience. In doing so, he has established himself as one of the most influential American artists anywhere. Last year, he made the Time Magazine 100 list of the most influential people at the forefront of ideas, innovation, power, and change. Themes and ideas found in his work are reflective of the complex web of personal and social issues that have been instrumental in molding his life. The events that surrounded his childhood had a powerful effect on his artistic career. The artist once said, quote, "You can't be born in Birmingham, Alabama in 1955 and grow up in South Central Los Angeles near the Black Panther headquarters and not feel like you've got some kind of social responsibility. You can't move to Watts in 1963 and not speak about it." That determined a lot where my work was going, close quote. In 1963, a year after he left his hometown of Birmingham, the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church killed 4 Black children and injured others. This sparked riots and a national outcry. The same year, Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his "I Have a Dream" speech on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. In 1965, 10-year-old Marshall, now living in LA, witnessed the Watts riots, the largest and costliest urban rebellion of the civil rights era. While his early years were rooted in the geography of his upbringing, he developed an insatiable curiosity and a passion for learning. The portable magic of books became a wellspring of discovery. Through one of his childhood research projects, he learned about the prominent social realist artist Charles White. In junior high, after receiving a drawing class scholarship to the Otis Art Institute in LA, he met Charles White, who was a professor at Otis. The themes of Charles White's art that he explored, African American history, the fight for freedom, the nobility of Black people, the dignity of labor, inspired young Marshall. His interest in art flourished, and he enrolled in the Otis Art Institute, and at Otis he received a Bachelor of Arts degree in 1978, and in 1999 an honorary doctorate. He began exhibiting widely throughout Europe and the United States in the early 70s and the 80s. And after participating in a number of group shows, Marshall received a resident fellowship from the Studio Museum of Harlem in 1985, and in New York, he met his wife, the actress Cheryl Lynn Bruce. In 1987, he and his family settled in Chicago. In 1999, he was awarded a grant from the National Endowment for the Arts that allowed him to concentrate on his art full-time. He has dedicated years to experimenting and analyzing all the possibilities that different genres and styles offer through the history of Western art. Best known for his stylized, large-scale paintings depicting the beauty and complexity of African American life, the artist uses many types of mediums, including collage, drawing, murals, sculpture, installation, photography, and even comic books. In addition, he served as production designer for such films as Daughters of the Dust in 1989 and The Hendrix Project in 1991. For 13 years, from 1993 to 2006, he taught at the School of Art and Design at the University of Illinois in Chicago. In 1997, he was the recipient of the Genius Grant from the MacArthur Foundation. The same year, he received an invitation to show his work at Documenta, an international contemporary art exhibit every 5 years in Germany, and a place at the Whitney Biennial, the longest-running survey of American art held every 2 years. In 2014, he received the Wolfgang von Prize, a highly regarded award given annually by the Society of Modern Art at the Museum Ludwig in Cologne, Germany. Marsh is also a recipient of the Rosenberg Medal given by the University of Chicago for outstanding achievement in creative and performing arts. Numerous groundbreaking international exhibitions have revealed Marshall's practice to be complex and compelling, one that synthesizes a wide range of pictorial traditions to counter stereotypical representations of Black people in society. One 2016-17 highlight was the largest museum retrospective of his art. The exhibition encompassed nearly 80 works of art from his remarkable 35-year career. It was organized by the Museum of Contemporary Art of LA, Museum of Contemporary Art Chicago, and the Metropolitan Museum of Art New York. More than 50 museum collections hold works by the artist. These include the Met, the Art Institute of Chicago, LA County Museum, Museum of Contemporary Chicago, Museum of Contemporary LA, Museum of Modern Art New York, National Gallery in Washington, D.C., San Francisco Museum of Art, the Studio Museum of Harlem, the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis, the Whitney Museum of American Art in New York. The list goes on. His art has restored the absence of the Black figure in the canon of Western art and has thereby changed the dynamic of art museums around the world. Marshall's work illustrates that the American experience is unimaginable without including Black history and culture. The result is a stunning body of work that's both intimate and monumental. Please help me welcome Kerry James Marshall.
Submit a proposal for the sculpture project after I received a phone call from Jeff Fleming, who's the director over at the Des Moines Art Center. And in a way that invitation from Jeff came because he was familiar with some work of mine, because the Principal Financial Group here in Des Moines bought a painting of mine Actually, one of the pivotal paintings of my career and my development. One of those paintings that you make where you understand that you really reached a new plateau, and that from that moment on, everything you did was on a different register. That you understood more clearly what you were going to be about and whether you were going to be able to achieve all the things you set out to achieve. And that was a painting called The Lost Boys. You'll see it in the slides I show later on. But it was because he knew about that painting that he thought I might be a worthwhile person to ask. To submit a proposal for this project. And when I came out to Des Moines 12 years ago to meet with Odell McGee, Ramonda Belcher, and a few of the other people who were on the committee that was looking for somebody to help develop this project, that was my introduction to Des Moines, because I don't think I had ever been to Des Moines before then. But when I saw the enthusiasm they had for the development of this project, I saw the kinds of things they were doing at the Des Moines Arts Center, it just seemed like this is the right place to be, and this is the right kind of thing to be involved with. And so I've been really excited and really pleased to have been invited, and I'm glad that we finally arrived. We have arrived at the moment of fruition, where the long journey now really begins. Because the life of that piece of artwork, as a sculpture, as a monument, begins now that it exists. And so it remains from here on as a reminder to everybody who encounters it, and to generations who are yet born, to know that something really important happened in Des Moines in 1925. That when the National Bar Association was founded, it was founded not as a thing that was going to be temporary, that it was a thing that needed to be long-lasting.
Yes.
And so this is how it starts. This is how it begins. And so in the process of going through some of the things I'm going to show you, we'll cover a little bit about how it all begins, how it all starts, and how a certain ambition to participate fully in the narrative of the making of history and the narrative of the making of art history is something anybody who aspires to be a part of it has some control over, and it's the things that you do. Not the things that other people do, but the things that you do that determine how well you participate in and what place you position yourself to be in. Because my motto, I learned this over time, is that if you leave it up to somebody else to decide for you where you should be, how you should play, and what the level of your achievement is, then you will be in trouble for the rest of your life. Because you cannot allow your well-being to be determined by somebody else deciding for you what the limits of your capabilities should be. And so this conversation starts out with this book on the history of art, because when I was first introduced to the idea of what it meant to be an artist, that's what I wanted to be a part of. I wanted to be a part of that history. And being a part of that history wasn't just the ability to be able to make a picture, to do a drawing, to make a painting, to do a sculpture. It's not just about that, because a lot of people can do that. And a lot of people do it really well, and a lot of those people who do it well never end up in the narrative of this art history. So I always thought there had to be something else that the people who were in there knew that made it more likely than not that they would be a part of that narrative. And if I knew those things, then that would give me a better than 50-50 chance of being included in that narrative myself. And so the mission is not just to acquire the skill to be able to do the thing, to make the picture, to do the art. The narrative also to understand how the structure of these histories are organized, to know it from the inside out, and then when you get in a room with people who make decisions about what kinds of things get included in those things or not, to have something to say about it too. And so that's how I started out. And so when you look at the range of things that I've done, that at the point at which I entered the practice of being an artist, it seems to me that the only way you can legitimately participate is if you know everything. And that you're able to do everything. And so in the work that I've done over time, you'll see the range of things, and that range of things was what made the production of the Monumental Journey sculpture possible. So, let me see here. Is that it? No. Is that it? No. Which one is my music advance? Oh, I see. I'm a bad guy. All right. Oh, yes. So like the National Bar Association, which was founded because black lawyers weren't allowed to join the American Bar Association, when I first encountered art history in the form of these kinds of books, it was clear to me very early on that there was very few black people in any of those historical narratives. So you would get the impression that black people who made art never did anything that was worth putting in a book like these. And so, because of that, it became really important to me to guarantee that in one way or another, I was able to get myself placed in some of these books. Because at a certain point in your development as a human being, it has to become unacceptable to stand on the sidelines and only watch other people make certain kinds of decisions. I like looking at those books. I like going to the art museum. I like the stuff that I see. But it's not enough to just enjoy other people's achievements. I mean, you want to match those achievements with achievements in your own. I mean, that just seems basic to me. And so, if the way you get to places like this is determined by some secret cabal of people who meet in a room somewhere and they draw up a list and they check off the people that they want to include, then that mystery of how things happen means that you're forever outside of that kind of process. But if there are things that the artists who end up in these books know, meaning real knowledge, if there are things that they know, then if there are things that they can know that you can know, then you can actually sort of figure out some kind of way to use the knowledge that you can acquire strategically and position yourself, make the kinds of choices that will lead to this kind of outcome. So one of the first artists that gave me the idea that it was more about what you knew than it was about what you could do was Leonardo da Vinci. If you look, the very first art book I ever bought was one of those great big giant coffee table books of Leonardo da Vinci's works. They used to advertise them in the backs of magazines for $19.99 back in the 70s. And my father used to go to used magazine and bookshops in LA on Alvarado. How many people have been to LA? You know where Alvarado Boulevard is? You know where MacArthur Park is? On 7th and Alvarado, there was a used bookstore, a magazine store that my father used to go to all the time. And I would go with him sometimes. And they had this book, this Leonardo da Vinci book in that store. It was $9.99. I paid for it on time. Back then, I used my allowance. My father used to give us $7.50 every 2 weeks for allowance. Now this was back in the 60s when $7.50 meant something. But I put that book on layaway at the bookstore, and every time I got my allowance, I'd give them a couple of dollars on the book. And when I got that book, the day I got that book and I could take it home, pouring over that book was just like being introduced to a magic shop. Because what I found out, that if you Leonardo da Vinci made very few paintings really, But the vast majority of the work he did in these, what they call the codexes, these notebooks he made. And what he showed in those notebooks is that you could use artworks to learn about all kinds of other things. So he did drawings about botany, he did drawings on anatomy, he did engineering drawings, he did architectural drawings, he did theater design. So the scope of what he did was so vast that it made me understand that what an artist was somebody, not somebody who made pretty pictures, it was somebody who investigated the way in which the world works. They simply used drawing and painting and sculpture as a tool to help them understand that. And so I adopted that as a kind of primary approach to what it meant to be an artist. I never assumed that making art was about personal self-expression. That it was about the way in which you engaged with ideas about the way the world worked. Now, some people remember the art critic for Time magazine, Robert Hughes, whose style of writing really appealed to me. Because on the one hand, he could be a curmudgeon, but he was incredibly insightful, and the way he wrote was incredibly poetic to me. So he did a series that was on PBS, it was called Shock of the New. And I watched that series, but in the book, he made this one statement about what artworks were. He said, what an artwork is first of all, a proposition about what is real. And this proposition about what is real is the thing that representation on some level addresses itself to. And the things become real when you make them real in imagery, because the way we encounter the world most of the time is through imagery of some sort. I mean, most of us never got a chance. When I was 6 years old, I couldn't get on a plane and take a safari and go to Africa and see a giraffe in the wild. But I could pick up a National Geographic magazine, and the National Geographic magazine took me everywhere around the world. And I could see what the scope of human achievement was, and I could see how vast and interesting and complex everything else that was happening on the planet really was. That's really what fascinated me. And it was pictures like those, it was images of the world that made me want to be an artist. It was images of the world that made me want to say that I want to make pictures like these pictures because I want to make pictures that make other people feel like these pictures are making me feel. And I want to make pictures that introduce other people to ideas the way these pictures are introducing me to ideas. That's how it all started for me. And for me, it started literally when I was in kindergarten. It was a scrapbook of those pictures that my kindergarten teacher kept. So what that means is that you should never underestimate the value of introducing a child to things that seem way beyond their ability to comprehend what it is, because you never know what kind of impact that's going to have. You never know. So everything is in play when you think about and you know something about everything that's in play. So anyway, now I can keep on going like this for a long time. But what I'm going to do, so this is sort of a trip down memory lane, has a direct relationship to everything that these books represent in terms of the way we understand what the history of art really is, and how somebody like me will find their way into a place like that. So I'm going to try not to talk too much. No, that's down there to keep the program moving. I'm going to show a lot of pictures because I think I got over 100 pictures in here to show. And so I'm going to have to do a lot of that without making a lot of commentary about it. And from time to time, I'll chime in. But what I want this to demonstrate in a way is just on some of what it takes. This is what I understood it took. That's me. And thank you. Am I going backwards? I hit the up. That was the up button. That is the up button.
Well, even I don't know how to run my own. Yeah.
going down, it's going backwards. So, well, you know what? So here, when you talk about ideas, I mean, everything that happens in the world happens because somebody decided it should happen. And so this, I don't know how many people know what DARPA is. It's the Defense Advanced Research Projects Administration. It's a department of the federal government connected with the Defense Department. And their mission, the mission statement of DARPA, is to prevent technological surprise. You laugh. You laugh. Well, what does that mean? What does that mean? So what they will do, is they offer grants to anybody with what they think is a good idea, anybody that has a technological idea. So this to prevent technological surprise is to make sure that no other country on the planet is able to develop the technology that allows them to get ahead of the United States in any aspect of national security, national defense, or economic advance. And to do that, they will fund a project you have for 3 years if they think it's a good enough idea, and they will help you to develop it to make sure that all of this proprietary invention is American-owned and American-made and able to be deployed by the United States. That's what this company exists for. Is how do you maintain American superiority technologically, basically. That's what it's for. And that's what they mean by to prevent technological surprise. And some of this has a lot to do with the fact that when the Russians launched Sputnik, you know what the outcome of that was. It was the space race, which led to the Americans being the first country to put a man on the moon. This is all the consequence of the fear that comes from the fact that if somebody else gets a little bit ahead of you, they might do some stuff that you don't like, too. But this is sort of the way in which the world sort of operates. It's organizations like that. I don't think the art world is any different than that, actually. I don't see any difference between doing what I'm doing as an artist and between doing what they're doing in the Defense Department or in particle physics or in cell biology. I don't see any difference between those things. Because there used to be another slide in this cube that was from a company that worked on the Human Genome Project. And if you think about what the Human Genome Project was, the purpose of it was to sequence the human genome, figure out what all of those component parts of the human genome were, and then once you're able to identify what all those parts are and what their functions are, then you can start figuring out what to do with them. Then you can use that information, use that knowledge to make things happen on your terms, as opposed to simply being subject to the vagaries, you could say, of human existence. I mean, people live, people get sick, people die. Well, I mean, there are people thinking about how to stop that. I mean, they were talking about the fact that old age, I mean, that maybe people can live forever. And if there's a way you can figure out how to manipulate the sequence of genes to prevent people from aging and getting old and dying faster, well, why not? Why not? Then some people say, well, why not? But one of the things that suggests also is that if human beings can imagine a thing, then they can eventually make a thing. So human ingenuity is a pretty fantastic phenomenon. So, but when I make my artwork, it's that thing. So how do you account for the difference between those two things being produced by the same person? And the way you have to account for the difference between those two things is there's an idea associated with each one of those. And each one of those modes of representation have a different kind of utility. And so given whatever the necessity is of a moment, you do one thing as opposed to another because it's the thing that's most effective at a given time or not. That you escape from the limitations that are imposed on you by sort of simple ability or natural talent. And that the only way you can escape from those limitations is to impose some sort of willful intent on the things that you're trying to do. And to do things that put pressure on your ability to continue doing just the same thing over and over and over again. You have to put some pressure on your ability. Otherwise, you fall into a lot of bad habits. And it's easy to keep doing the same thing if people praise you enough for it. But what you can find is that that's the fastest way to death you can get to by just repeating the same things over and over and over again. Because not only will it become uninteresting to you, it will eventually become uninteresting to other people too. So that's the thing. So how do you account for those things? On your left is a painting called A Portrait of the Artist as a Shadow of His Former Self. On the other side is a self-portrait of the artist, done fairly recently for the cover of the New York Times magazine. So it's that thing, how do you account for those two things? What is the idea that causes one and then the idea that causes the other? That's what I'm interested in, the ideas that cause things to be in the form that they are. Now, same thing, how do you account for the print on each of those two prints? How do you account for those two things being done by the same person? And it's the accounting for those differences between things that is what the underpinnings of the history of art. It's like, how do you account for Picasso being able to draw and paint like a master when he was 9 and 10 years old, so much so that his father, who was a painter who trained him in the beginning, looking at his son's work, said, well, man, he's so much better than I am. I just bring this stop. Maybe I just stop doing what I'm doing. And then later on, having Picasso do some stuff that people were always saying, you know, my child can do that. How do you account for that? What's the idea? I'm not going to say anything about a lot of this. I just show some stuff. But so now, when I enrolled in school at Otis back in 1977, this was a picture that was in my portfolio, my admissions portfolio. At one time in my development, early on. But I was doing that as a part of a process of understanding from the inside out, as I was saying earlier, the dynamics of art history, and why things change from one thing to another, and why it might be more useful to do one thing as opposed to another thing. Hey, that's a drawing of Cheryl. That comes from a painting that you'll see later on. But anyway, I'm going to show a couple of things. Let's just look at some stuff for a minute, because I got a lot to show. And then some of these early works, like that first one called Portrait of the Artist Established for Himself, had to do with this idea of visibility and invisibility, about the absence of the presence of black figures in the historical record. And so this is a painting called Two Invisible Men Naked. Now, I grew up watching a lot of science fiction and horror movies. I love Claude Rains in The Invisible Man. But the difference in the concept of invisibility, as it was described by H.G. Wells in his novel The Invisible Man, and the way that Ralph Ellison described the condition of invisibility in his book The Invisible Man, is apart from each other.
Yeah.
One is phenomenal, the other one is psychological. And that psychological burden of invisibility that black people have to exist under is debilitating. I mean, in that book, if you read the novel, I mean, you can just like the tension between existence and non-existence, between humanity and the lack of humanity. I mean, it's all sort of woven into that. But all in the H.G. Wells novel, the man took off his clothes, you couldn't see him. He can go anywhere he wanted to go after that. But in Ralph Ellison's book, your presence, you could be in that narrative in the prologue when he bumps into the man on the street and he says, you know, I could have cut his throat, you wouldn't know what happened because he didn't see me. And he didn't see me because he didn't want to see me. So anyway, so did I do a lot of stuff? Let's go through some of it. Now, as Jessica said, collage, prints, paintings, sculpture, film, photography, installation, it's all in there. But it all sort of rotates around a series of ideas about how form works in picture making. And this is a group of collages that I made based on a poem by this poet from Martinique named Aimé Césaire. I don't know how many people know who Aimé Césaire was. Now, Aimé Césaire was, I mean, he's the closest thing to the kind of philosopher king, the philosopher politician that we know of. And so, Aimé, he was the mayor of Fort-de-France in Martinique. But he was an incredible surrealist poet. He wrote an epic poem called A Notebook of a Return to My Native Land. And in that poem, it demonstrated how you can be poetic and political simultaneously. And so I tried to make some works based on that principle, using a refrain from the poem. At the end of every stanza, he returns to this frame, and at the end of the wee hours. And so all of these collages were titled At the End of the Wee Hours. And so there's a whole series of them. But they also had, as a part of their motivation, an investigation of how analytical Cubist paintings work. And so, are we going to have a little Q&A after? Mm-hmm. Oh, so that means that's the motivation to go faster so we can leave a little bit of time. You might want to ask me something. So anyway, but these collages, just take a look at some stuff. Now, this is the beginning of that comics project, which was at the Carnegie International in 1999, of which there will be an updated reprisal of it in the upcoming Carnegie International in October. So if you happen to be in Pittsburgh on October the 11th or after, there's a new iteration of this sort of comic strip, which is called The Rhythm Master, which is expanded to include a series of other narratives that go along with it. That'll be in the Carnegie International. But this time it was used as an installation where, I mean, it really wasn't that the comic strip itself in those vitrines in a space at the Carnegie that was called the Treasure Room. And in those vitrines is typically where they held the rare porcelains and stuff like that. And so I used the comic strip that I made to block the access to the precious space behind the glass. But it created some gaps in there so that you were tempted to look past the things that were covering the window to see the real things that were supposed to be inside. But the thing that was on the window was the only original thing that was there. So it's complicated. And then the fact that, so it's representational imagery, but because of light, the vitrine is lit from the inside, and the images are printed on both sides. That doubling of the images made those images abstract. So anyway, see, that's how artists think crazy stuff sometimes. But so it all starts with the breakout of African sculpture from the African art wing of the Art Institute in Chicago. With those African power figures becoming the kind of hero characters that populated the narrative. And that's the protagonist series of, as a part of this project, I did a series of monuments for a new America, where, I mean, it's somewhere where you have an augmentation. There are a lot of monuments in the United States that can use a little augmentation. Because if they're monuments that are dedicated to the fight for freedom, the fight for liberty, then it's kind of ironic that people who are fighting for liberty and fighting for freedom were buying and selling people at the same time that they were fighting for liberty and freedom. And so we have a monument to George Washington, but George Washington was a slave owner too. So we're not going to take it down to Washington Monument, but instead of that, just augment it. And you can augment it with an image, a statue of Nat Turner, who was a freedom fighter. Legitimate fight for his own freedom. So why not? Why not? And that augmentation complicates the narrative in the ways that it needs to be complicated. Because it's like you're not entitled to an uncomplicated monument to your greatness if there were complications to the way you achieve that greatness. You're not entitled to that. And it's okay that we know about it. We should all know about those things. So anyway, I'm not going to say much about it because those are puppets. Those are those same characters made for a Bunraku style puppet performance I did at the Wexner Art Center in Ohio, in Columbus, in Ohio State. So, and that's, there's a long story behind that. Those are the characters. And some paintings down. Let's go down memory lane. Just look at some pictures. I can tell you what some of the titles of them are. This is called The Prettiest Girl in the Whole Wide World. This is Frankenstein and the Bride of Frankenstein. In the spotlight. And I did a whole series of pinups. That the image that preceded those, a girl wagging her finger, that was a part of the series of things I call pinups. And this is also a part of that. But you start to see how the variety of things, this is called Black Star, it's part of the pinup group too. I did an exhibition in Vienna at the Secession, which was called Who's Afraid of Red, Black, and Green, which was a kind of play on a painting that Barnett Newman made called Who's Afraid of Red, Yellow, and Blue. And so I took that painting as a point of departure and made a series of paintings that reflected on the ways in which the red, black, and green can be used as a kind of revolutionary model. And that fear of what that means, the implications of that flag, is a part of what the work is about. But what I did was I took John Punch, history, how history enters into the work. Who knows? Anybody know anything about John Punch? Who John Punch is? So John Punch this is the black man in American history around whom the idea of black people being slaves for all of their lives was constructed. But John Punch was an indentured servant. And he and two white guys who were indentured servants ran away from the guy they were working for. When they were caught, the two white guys he was with had 4 and 5 years added on to their term of indenture. John Punch was made a slave for the rest of his natural life. So that moment in which the differential treatment of a white man and a black man for the same offense resulted in a different kind of sentence was done around this man, John Punch. Now, he has a presence in history because the story is there, but there are no images of people like John Punch. And so what I was doing with a lot of the work I made was to make images of people who have a presence and a place in history, but Same thing with this man in a way. David Walker. Now everybody knows who David Walker was. Yeah. So this is a painting. It's called Believed to be a portrait of David Walker, circa 1830. So David Walker wrote a pamphlet, famous pamphlet called David Walker's Appeal to the Colored People of the World, and in particular, those of the United States. And what that pamphlet is a critique of the Declaration of Independence as a hypocritical document. And he lived in Boston, but he used to try to smuggle the pamphlet into the South by sewing it into the linings of used coats and stuff that he was selling. And then, obviously, one day David Walker turned up dead on his doorstep. And they don't know why. They don't know how it happened. But David Walker's Appeal, the book, you can get it, it's in print still. But this is how I engage with history. It's the ways in which aspects of history are unfamiliar to us. So you have to figure out some kind of device to make those things more familiar, to make them accessible. And I do it through creating fictional portraits of people who've done things that were really important, but of whom there are no representation. So I do it through that as a method. So this is a painting called A Portrait of Nat Turner with the Head of His Master. And it's the way in which, so Nat Turner as a kind of avenging angel on some level. And I put this with the Caravaggio, in part because, we are fond of making heroes of some people who chop people's heads off to preserve their liberty, but making criminals of other people who chop somebody's head off to achieve their liberty. And so I said, well, so how do you distinguish between those two things? Why is Nat Turner a criminal and why is David a hero? So we have to acknowledge and then come to terms with the discrepancy between those two things. Weren't they both trying to achieve the same thing? So how do we negotiate those kinds of histories, those kinds of narratives? And then the same thing. So this is called, it's still life and wedding portrait. And that's a portrait of Harriet and John Tubman. And so it's like, well, what's the purpose of that picture? Well, we are used to thinking of Harriet Tubman as General Moses. One of the main leaders of the Underground Railroad, taking black people from the South to Canada and to the North to freedom. We're used to thinking, but we're not used to thinking about Harriet Tubman as a woman. As a woman that anybody would desire. And so you have to give back to Harriet Tubman the fullness of her femininity and everything else too. And the way to do that is to acknowledge that she only has the name Tubman because she married a man named John Tubman. That's why she's Harriet Tubman. She was a woman, and she was tough, but she was also a woman. She was a woman that somebody desired. So you can't just make them a one-dimensional kind of character who's only about one thing. So how do you give back to black people in history their complexity, their full range of their complexity? That's how you do it. You create a thing that allows people to consider them in the fullness of their humanity. While at the same time positioning the work as a thing that belongs in a museum dedicated to the preservation of art too. Which was the same thing. This was a portrait of a portrait of Scipio Moorhead, circa 1774, 75, something like that. But how come we know Scipio Moorhead? We know Scipio Moorhead because he made the image that was the frontispiece to the book of poetry that was published by Phyllis Wheatley. She wrote a poem about it. It's the only reason we know his name. That's why we know him. But we don't know anything about what he looked like, but we only know he made that one work. And so then I made a series of works that were about who paints. Who painted? What's the difference between abstraction and representation? So they paint. They paint. They paint. They paint. They paint. And then they curate. It's called curating. And they love each other. From a series of paintings called vignettes. They're based in part on 18th century French Rococo paintings. The vignette as a device was an 18th century creation of the French Rococo. The kind of irregularity of the whole thing, the excess in the works. This is how I engage with the history of art, to make new work that takes advantage of some of the devices that were used in earlier art and makes them work for a thing that I am interested in seeing those things work for. Now, there's also a way in photography. So this is a triptych. It's a piece called Heirlooms and Accessories, which is based on a really famous photograph. Everybody knows it because it's in every history book. It was of a double lynching that took place in Marion, Indiana in 1930. What we know is that from the way those lynchings took place were public spectacles. People came to them like they were going to a picnic. And photographers made photographs of those things, and they made postcards that circulated through the U.S. mail. Now, there was an exhibition of a guy who collected a lot of these postcards called Without Sanctuary. And there was several hundred of these postcards that this one man, a white man, had collected. And his postcards of these lynchings, and the fact that the people who were participating in these events had no fear that they would ultimately be prosecuted because everybody who was there is an accessory to a double murder, basically. And so people would stand there and they look at the photographer, they pointing at the bodies, stuff like that. I mean, it was like they weren't all that worried. But what I did was, what people tend to do often is to focus on the bodies of the two black men who were hanging from the tree in the background. But I eliminated all of that and focused. There were three women who were standing in the front of the photograph, and all three of them were looking at the camera. And those three women represented three different generations. There's a young girl who could be more than 13 or 14. Another woman who on the end of them was probably about 21, 22, and then another woman in the middle. So those generations. And in a way, so the picture, Heirlooms and Accessories, is largely about the inheritance that comes from that kind of violence. That everything that gets passed down from generation to generation is secured by that kind of violence. So, but it's also another one of those ways to focus on, not to focus on the tragedy or the trauma, because we're familiar with that. We're used to thinking about those things, but what we're not used to thinking about is the context in which that kind of violence takes place. And the normalcy that accompanies it. We're not used to thinking about it like that. And that's where the real tragedy is, that it's normalized, that it was acceptable, that people enjoyed themselves while they were there. That's the order of the whole thing, that people enjoy themselves. so what you can see in a lot of, so I'm moving in and out of a lot of different aspects of what it means to be alive. And the things that you can be interested in. I'm not just interested in one thing. And so as an artist, I need to demonstrate how much of a whole human being I am too. So that, I like nice things. I'm interested in history. I'm moved by tragedy. I'm affected by material comments. I'm affected by all those things too, by politics, by history, by comedy, by tragedy. I'm affected by all those things, and so the work that I make comes from and addresses a lot of those things too. I'm not a one-dimensional human being. And so why should my work only be one kind of thing? So now, there's a great painting by an artist named Fragonard, one of those Rococo painters from France, called The Swing. And so this is my version of The Swing. But it's 5 paintings. It's 5 paintings in which this action is animated. And so if I do them in succession like we're looking at a film clip, you'll see what I mean. So starting here. So it's a 360-degree rotation. He picks her up and swings her around. That's the swing. And so anyway, interesting thing. So from black and white to color, that Rococo thing, they made some pretty pictures. And everybody likes them, but art historians claim to despise them. And so, but all of these works have to do with that Rococo sensibility. And so it's that kind of pleasure, it's work that's really about pure pleasure. And in this case, it's the pleasure of painting. It's the pleasure of constructing imagery that has a kind of lighthearted, you could say frivolous kind of intent, dreamy kind of imagery. But everything is complicated by the perspective I'm able to bring to those things, so it's not exactly the same as the way the Rococo paintings work. But one of the things the work does is that almost every device they use in Rococo paintings is used in a different way in these paintings. More collage. Now, some of those are actually duplicates. And I don't know when you transfer this to the computer, it's doubled some parts of the program, because when I went through it, there was only one of everything. When I gave you that thumb drive, there was only one of everything in there, because I looked at it. But also the ways, how do you deal with things like slavery in the Middle Passage? This is a picture that's sort of about that. But it doesn't appear to be about that on its face. Except if you read through the whole thing, it's about the ways in which culture is transferred from one place to another, and that culture comes with people. So one of the things we do know is that when Africans were brought to the United States as slaves, those people didn't come, they may have come empty-handed, but they didn't come empty-headed.
That's right.
They brought things that they knew with them, and things they wanted to do with them. And those things they wanted to do were maintained and preserved and passed on and practiced and transformed by a lot of people. And so you can go from the United States to Cuba, to South America, to Brazil, to Colombia. You will find aspects of African culture still being practiced among black people who are taken to those places, and it almost looks exactly the same way as it does if you go back to Nigeria, you go back to Ghana, you go back to, it's the same thing. They call it something different. In Haiti, they call it voodoo. In Brazil, it's Santeria. In Colombia, it's candomblé. In Cuba, it has another thing. So it's all the same thing, except it's been modified to operate in the place where they were. And in most of these religions, because Catholicism was imposed on them, they had to figure out a way to syncretize their religion with the acceptable Catholic saints. And so they used Catholic saints to stand in for their own gods and saints. Now, and all of these works are about those kinds of things in one way or another. So anyway, let's look at some more pictures. But you see how, so I'm using those symbols on that person's body are from Haitian bébés. They're the designs they use to represent what they call the Orisha.
Lua.
The Lua. The Lua. The Orisha is actually in Brazil. They call it Orisha, but in Haiti it's the Lua. But they use those symbols called bébés as the emblems of those gods. And then that painting, Jeff Fleming, that's the Lost Boys painting. I made this painting and this painting called This Style. That painting, so if my ambition was to be in the history and to be in the museums, to be included amongst those artists you go to the museum to look, this was the painting that accomplished that for me. So I grew up in Los Angeles. Of course, the LA County Art Museum was the museum they took us to on field trips when I was in grade school. That painting was the first painting bought by a major museum that I have made, and it was bought by the LA County Art Museum. And it's that kind of thing where you say, well, if I want to be in there, how do I want to be represented? And if I'm coming in there, can I come in with everything blazing like everybody else? And not only come in with everything, that painting is 10 foot by 10 foot square. So you're not going to walk in there and pass by it without noticing. It reminds me of something that another artist, Chuck Close, said once. He said, I didn't want to have people going into a museum and looking at work and asking, is there a Chuck Close in here? But the thing is that if you think about it, so it's like, well, why do we know about people like Picasso? Why do we know about Matisse? Why do we know about those artists? And we know about those artists because when they came on the scene, the work that we are familiar with from the Renaissance all the way up to their moment, that stuff was so magnificent, so impressive, that they thought there was no way they could compete with that work, so they had to figure out something else to do that would give them a chance to be recognized alongside that work, because you can't go head to head with that stuff and win. You can't. I mean, it's sort of like Kevin Durant going to the Golden State Warriors. You realize we can't keep going head to head against those people and win. So I'm going with them. But that's the thing. And so if you have any ambition, your ambition is to be in the game. Yeah. And to be in it at the same level that everything else that's in there is at. And so that's how to me, that was how you do it. And you make a picture that takes advantage of the accumulated knowledge of picture making up to the moment you arrive on the scene. And then you deploy those tactics strategically to put yourself in a position where you can win the game. That's how we do it. That's how you do it. I mean, that's how John Cochran did it. You know? You may not like the outcome sometimes. Some people don't. But if you're going to play that game, care whether you're guilty or not sometimes. They are bound by their oath to give you the best defense they can muster. And if they find a loophole they can exploit, they better jump on it. They had better. So, anyway. More pictures. But so it's like, there's a way in which you take ways of making images that are devalued, that are undervalued. How do you do that and make those things then matter? And one of the things you do is you treat it as if it means something. So now this is huge. I mean, it looks kind of kitschy. The beach scene with the sunset and the seagull and stuff. I mean, it's kind of kitschy. But if you do a kitschy painting like that and it's 9 feet long, yeah, so he must have meant that. Yeah. And so, but these are strategies. So how do artists transform things into objects that people need to consider? There's a whole list of devices you can use to make that happen. Cityscape. But these are the kinds of paintings you never saw black people in. You just never saw black people in pictures like those. And everybody wants to be in pretty pictures. That's one of those things where you can't keep watching other people go around in pretty pictures. You want to be in a pretty picture too. So you got to make them. You tell what those are. Boy Scout, Girl Scout, Cub Scout, Brownie, Scoutmaster, Den Mother. Happy 4th, this painting is called Bang. And that says Happy 4th of July, Bang. And that the banner that those two doves are carrying up at the top is a banner from the Revolutionary War. It says, resistance to tyranny is obedience to God. Is what it says. And then a series of paintings based on housing projects in Chicago that all have garden as part of their name. So Outgeld Garden, Stateway Gardens. And when we moved to Los Angeles, to Watts, we moved to the Nickerson Gardens projects on 112th Street. In Watts, that's where we moved to from Birmingham. Wentworth Gardens. This is all in my neighborhood, right near where my studio is. And so I make a lot of work that's centered around where I am. It's like so that where you are and the people around you can be the subject of pictures too. You see that doubling thing happening? Our time. So where it was what used to be your time becomes our time. Sometimes when black people move into a neighborhood that was all white, and all the white people move out, it becomes black town. And now this is the painting that a lot of people are waiting to hear me say something about. Because this is like one of those instances in which like the value of the work supersedes anybody's knowledge about what the work really is. Because somebody paid a whole lot of money for it, all of a sudden people got interested. So I made that painting 25 years ago. I don't need to say anything more about it. But I did have a nice conversation with Mr. Combs. about the moment. And now that's a really long woodcut. That thing is 50 feet long. So it's 12 pounds, 4 by 8. All printed by hand in 8 colors. And why did you do something like that? I did it because I wanted to see if I could do it. And I did an edition of 5. And photography. Now, there's a painting in there. And it's called The Black Painting. And it's one of those works it's about a lot of things, but it's about perception. I mean, it's sort of right at the edge of visibility. To paint a picture where you control the values and the colors so that everything operates right at the edge of visibility. A photographer about that same thing. Oh, see now, all that doubling. That painting called School of Beauty, School of Culture. And it's based on a beauty school that's around the corner from my studio. But it's also a reference to a really famous painting in the National Gallery in London by Hans Holbein called The Ambassadors. And in that painting of the Ambassadors, there's this really funny shape down on the floor in front of these 2 guys who posed there, the picture taken. And you can't quite make out what the image is that's hovering down there. But if you go and look at the painting from the side, then the perspective on that shape down there comes into focus. And you find out it's a skull. So, and the implications of the picture is that the picture is what they call a vanitas, where you say it's like all of this wealth, all of this riches, all these nice clothes these guys are wearing, it all comes to this in the end, because they will be dead. It all comes to this. So don't get too, make this feel like you're too special, because in the end, it all comes to this. But that image is what they call an anamorphic image. And anamorphic is a kind of photographic distortion where the perspective of the thing can only be viewed from one specific angle, and it's really close to the side of that painting. You can only see it from there. And that same thing, so that image down at the bottom of this painting is an anamorphic image too. It does the same thing the image in the Holbein painting does. And it's one of those things where, oddly enough, the children, the babies in the picture, are the only ones who seem to be paying attention to it. They're the only ones who know something's going on here. Check it out. So anyway, you have high point. This is like for me, this is one of my favorite paintings I've made. I love this painting. I think it's a beautiful thing. And they were all familiar with those kind of things. But so installation, I'm going to speed through a few things. This is a part of that show I did at the end of the session. And you're going to see all the rest of the paintings that go with this. Who's Afraid of Red, Black, and Green? There's all the ways in which you can use that as a chromatic device to make pictures from. You know what I understand after all this time? I never turned that mic on. I got this thing in my pocket, but I never flipped the switch. I just realized that just now. But I think you can hear me. Now, these paintings, so this is one of those paintings from that group. So the Barnett Newman painting is 8 feet by 18 feet. So I took that painting as a point of departure, and I made 3 paintings. Each are exactly the same size as the Barnett Newman painting. But where his painting is a Who's Afraid of Red, Black, and Red, Yellow, and Blue, and it's dominated by a red color field. I took the three colors of the Black nationalist flag, the red, black, and green, and I used each one of those as the primary color. And then the bands, what Barnett Newman calls zips, the stripes he put on in the painting, those were the transitional colors. And so this is the red painting. So it's red, black, and green. There's a black band and a green band on the other side. But instead of this being just a pure color field painting, in the middle of that red field is a text. And the text is the title of a book that Angela Davis edited called If They Come in the Morning. It's a collection of letters from political prisoners in the United States. So it's still it's red on red. It does all the things that a color field painting is supposed to do, but then it adds this other dimension besides. So in that group, there's a red painting, there's a black painting, and then there's a green painting. And these are all 8 feet by 18 feet long. And so in this last one, because there's different kinds of imagery in there, there's a black band and a red band. And those bands are two apartment buildings behind those trees. One is in black and one is red brick. And they all allude in some way to James Baldwin's book, The Fire Next Time. And that phrase that Angela Davis used, if they come in the morning, she took that from an open letter that James Baldwin wrote to her when she was in jail after she had been captured while she was on the lam as America's Most Wanted. So he wrote to her this letter, and at the end of the letter, he closes with this phrase, if they came for you last night, my sister, they'll be coming for me in the morning. That's how he ended that letter. And since all of the work that I do has something to do with the idea or the concept of what it means to be black, the idea of visibility and invisibility, all of those things, even when I do photography. So I did a series of photographs that are done in ultraviolet light. And as we know, ultraviolet light is also called black light. Yes. And so essentially, it's like seeing in the dark. And the idea is, so that's me, that's a portrait of myself in my studio contemplating a painting, apparently in the dark. But it's not in the dark because it's illuminated. It's illuminated by a light, and that light happens to just be black light. And so your perception of things changes on the different conditions of light. And light is what makes photographs visible to us. The impact, the effects of light on a chemically sensitized film when it was filmed. Now it's on these circuits in digital photography. But that's how those images were made. And so the idea is, what can you do with black light when you see in the dark? So this is called Black Christmas. That's a bottle tree in our yard. You see the L train in the background? That L train runs down the alley behind our house in Chicago. That's an image of an actress friend of my wife named Tyler. That's Naomi Beckler, who's the curator at the MCA in Chicago. That's Cheryl Lynn Bruce in the pose of an obelisk. But you can do beauty in the dark. how do you preserve a relationship to African sculpture without really imitating African sculpture if you were born in the United States in 1955? How do you do that without trying to copy that thing? Well, you do it the same way I use the history of Western art. You take the concept that drives the reason why a thing looks like it does, and then you apply that concept to something else. And so what we're familiar with are these sculptures that were made in the Congo that people call nail fetish figures. You know, those statues where they have the nails and the metal shards and everything driven into the body, and when you look at them, it's like, oh man, that's cool because it's got all that stuff on it. But how do you do that and make it modern? And do it without using discarded material? And do it so that it becomes more meaningful in terms of the whole history of the transatlantic slave trade and everything else that happened after. And so what I did, so this piece is called Africa Restored. And it's taking the shape of the continent of Africa, cutting it up into pieces and reconfiguring it as a cubist sculpture. And then putting on top of it all of these emblems and images and objects and things like that that accumulate on it in the same way the nails and things do, but every one of those things that's on it is purpose-made. It's purpose-made to be on there. And they're all made in plastics. I'm into plastics. But that's the thing, so how do you do that? And how do you embed a lot of different ideas in a piece of sculpture like that? And so you see, I know there are people who can recognize some of the people who are represented there. You see Jimi Hendrix? You see Joanne Little? A lot of you all know who Joanne Little is. But anyway, that's how you engage with history, by creating opportunities for people to remember historical fun. Now, this piece is actually hanging at the Art Institute of Chicago right now. That's a picture of it hanging in the gallery at the Art Institute of Chicago. And the idea of this piece is so those African sculptors accumulated this mass of material over time. And so I tried to make a work, because typically there used to be a phrase that museums are places where artworks go to die. Yes. Because they become static and calcified in a place like this. So I said, well, can you make a work in the 20th century or the 21st century that remains open and alive and available for transformation in spite of the fact that it's been acquired by a museum? And so every time this work comes out, it has to have more stuff put on it. Every time. And so when they hung that up, a lot of that stuff that's on there is stuff I took there the day they put it up. To add to it. And so every time it comes out, it's different. It's different. It's got more stuff every time it's shown. So anyway. I only put that image in there because you got to go out and see the thing now. But this is how it was looking under construction. Jessica Rowe, who stayed with this project, was on top of it from the moment she got on the job and made sure that this thing proceeded at a pace that could lead us to this moment where it was finally completed. She sent me updates on how construction is going. So all while it was happening, I was watching from afar. Because at that point, there wasn't anything I could do. I can come and say, well, no, put that brick over there. So that wouldn't be helpful. So anyway, but this is the cause of being here. Now, some of those images on that, I did a couple of pieces that use these medallions that I made. And so that's Cheryl in her role as Cleopatra. And that picture is from another piece I did called Wake, that was based on the first 19 Africans that were sold at Jamestown in 1619. and their offspring. The first African American was William Tucker, was the first black person born from those Africans in the United States. We don't know who he looks like, what he looks like, but I think he could have looked like I did when I was in high school. So that's a picture of me from a high school program. He could have looked like me. Anyway, but that was variety. I'm just going to go through these things and then I'm going to stop. Set a low price if you're thinking about buying something. Now those coins are from a piece I did called a 99-cent piece. And it's 99 cents and change. 3 quarters, a dime, 2 nickels, and 4 pennies. That quarter is 5 feet in diameter. And they're all gilded brass. And so it's the 99-cent piece, but subtitled $36,000 in change, $136,000 in change. Because it costs $136,000 to have that made. And so again, the discrepancy between the image that's presented, 99 cents, which is a threshold of cheapness, and $136,000 in change, which is the cost of fabricating it, the discrepancy between those things is a part of what the work is about. It's how values are assigned to things. Now, I put that crown based on this is the crown. Gloria Smith was the second Miss Black America. That crown, that's the crown they used for the Miss Black America pageant. 1968. And then this whole thing, what is this abstraction thing? I mean, it's like, what is abstraction really? What is it really? And are these abstract?
Kerry, there's water.
Now that's, yeah, I don't need the water. I really don't. But anyway, those works were based on Rorschach blocks. But they were built up in a way that's inconsistent with the way Rorschachs are made. You know, the Rorschach, you put some ink on a page, you fold it in half, and it gives you that symmetrical kind of thing. But these are built up shape by shape, layer by layer, image by image. So it's an image of a thing that looks like a Rorschach blot. It's not a Rorschach, it's not a blot. It's a complete construction. It's made exactly the same way this painting is made. So there's no difference to me between that painting and the previous paintings. There's no difference between those two things. That's the image of the idea of a blot. That's the image of the idea of an artist in the studio. They're constructed the same way. Anyway, more pictures. I have a funny story about that, but I'm not going to tell it. And then I'm racing to the end, and then we'll save a minute or two maybe. So at the same time that I'm doing all these other things, I'm also interested in the way in which we represent Black people in moments of ordinariness and the mundane. Just the everyday being. And the pleasure of sort of living and existing in the world without having to be associated with some sort of activity that constantly leaves you trapped in the pursuit of simple freedom. Because we don't spend all our waking hours trying to figure out how to get free. We have fun sometimes. We do a lot of other stuff. And you got to show that other stuff too. Otherwise, you get the impression that we are only about one kind of thing. So in the fullness of our existence, we want to, like, what about those moments where we're just standing on the porch looking out into space? You know? What about that? Looking at TV at night. Or being a crowned beauty queen. Or going to a pilgrimage to a famous nightclub. You know, where the history of black music is laid out for you. Or having a picture taken, you know, with the one you love. That's another thing. So a whole series of photographs. But all taken in my neighborhood. That's at Peace Wake. More photographs. More photographs. When we moved into the neighborhood, and where we lived in Chicago, Bronzeville, I mean, it was during a period when there was a tremendous amount of gang violence and activity. And so these markings were all over the neighborhood. You know, there was the gangs, GDs, the gangs of disciples, and the Blackstone Rangers, and what was another? I can't remember, but these markings. So I started taking photographs of a lot of these gang tags. Right. I mean, it was interesting to me because a lot of those, for the GDs were the 6-pointed star. Because the thing is that they got a lot of the churches in the neighborhood we lived in on the south side used to be synagogues. A lot of those Baptist churches had been synagogues at one time. So all of the emblems are still in the stonework. But they marked that territory using that emblem. Maybe they didn't even know what the significance of it was. Maybe they didn't. And then this is a painting that is acquired by the Museum of Modern Art, as well as that one in the nightclub. But it's like in the climate in which police violence against black men in particular, but also against black women. We heard about Sandra Bland earlier in Mr. Thomas. Mr. Thomas's remarks. But it's like, and on every one of those police forces, there are black policemen on those forces as well. I mean, I would say, well, it's like, what do they think? I mean, how do they go to work every day and do their job? What do they think? And so I think you can make a picture that gives to the black police officers a kind of moment of reflection when they think. We're not telling you what they think, but I'm saying simply they must be